What happens when a mother's love meets a system of hate? When a routine trip for groceries turns into a nightmare, and the only thing standing between a young boy and a jail cell is the fiercest protector he's ever known, his mom. But this isn't just any mom. She's a powerhouse attorney with a badge of her own. We're about to witness a showdown where the law itself is on trial, and the price of arrogance is a fall so hard it shakes the very foundation of justice. Stay with us as we unravel a story of power, prejudice, and karma's ultimate checkmate. The automatic doors of the Trader Joe's on 14th Street slid open with a gentle whoosh, releasing the cool, conditioned air into the soupy heat of a Washington, D.C. August afternoon. 17-year-old Deshaun Hayes blinked his eyes, adjusting to the brilliant, unforgiving sunlight. He clutched the brown paper bag in his hand, the crinkling sound a small, satisfying testament to his successful mission. Inside was a pint of sublime ice cream in his mom's favorite flavor. Mint chip, a small peace offering for having forgotten to take out the recycling that morning. He was a good kid by all accounts, lanky with a thoughtful expression that often made him seem older than his years. Deshaun was more interested in coding camps and graphic novels than the trouble that could be found on the city's periphery. He was a rising senior at the prestigious Duke Ellington School of the Arts, his passion for digital media a burning flame. His mother, Zara Hayes, often joked that he could probably hack the Pentagon if he really wanted to, but he was too busy designing logos for imaginary companies. As he stepped onto the bustling sidewalk, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from his mom. "Almost there, sweetie. Got held up in a meeting. See you at home. Don't eat all my ice cream." A smile touched Deshaun's lips. He typed back a quick, no promises. "See you soon." He had just slid the phone back into his pocket when a shadow fell over him. It was large and imposing, blocking the sun. Deshaun looked up, squinting. A police officer stood before him, his face set in a grim, unreadable mask. The man was built like a refrigerator, all thick neck and broad shoulders, the fabric of his dark blue uniform straining at the seams. His hand rested casually on the butt of his holstered gun. "Can I help you, Officer Deshaun?" asked his voice, polite, a learned response drilled into him by his mother from the time he could speak. "Always be respectful, Deshaun. Enunciate. Hands where they can see them." The officer, whose name tag read Mallory, ignored the question. His eyes, small and hard like ball bearings, roved over Deshaun from his crisp new sneakers to his neatly braided hair. It was a look Deshaun knew all too well. It was the look that stripped you down, that assessed you not as a person, but as a potential threat, a statistic waiting to happen. "What's in the bag?" Officer Mallory grunted, his voice a low rumble. "Ice cream, sir," Deshaun said, holding the bag up slightly. "My mom's favorite." Mallory's lip curled into a semblance of a sneer. "Ice cream. Right. Let me see some ID." "Of course." Deshaun reached for his back pocket, moving slowly, deliberately. He could feel a familiar prickle of anxiety, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He was doing everything right, just like his mom taught him. But he also knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that sometimes doing everything right wasn't enough. He handed over his student ID from his wallet. Mallory barely glanced at it, his focus remaining on Deshaun's face. "This is a student ID. I need a government-issued identification. I don't have my driver's license on me, sir. I walked here from my house just a few blocks away. My mom is on her way to pick me up." "Convenient." Mallory drawled the single word dripping with sarcasm. He took a step closer, invading Deshawn's personal space. The scent of stale coffee and sweat filled the air. "We've had reports of shoplifting in this area. Teenagers fitting your description." Deshawn's heart began to hammer against his ribs. Fitting my description, he echoed his voice barely a whisper. He looked down at his own clothes, khaki shorts, a plain grey t-shirt with the NASA logo. He looked like 1,000 other kids enjoying their summer break. The unsaid words hung heavy in the air between them. Young black male. "You heard me," Mallory snapped. "Now I'm going to ask you again. What's in the bag?" "It's just ice cream," Deshawn insisted, his voice trembling slightly now. The injustice of it was a bitter pill in his throat. "You can look. I have the receipt." He fumbled in his pocket, pulling out the crumpled slip of paper from the checkout counter. Mallory ignored the proffered receipt. His eyes narrowed. "You're getting a little agitated there, son. Makes you look guilty. Why don't you just place the bag on the ground and put your hands on your head?" It wasn't a question. It was a command laced with threat. Passers-by were starting to notice their gazes lingering, a mixture of curiosity and pity in their eyes. A woman with a stroller hurried past, pulling her child closer. The shame was a hot flush that crept up Deshawn's neck. He was being treated like a criminal in broad daylight, just meters from the store where he had been a paying customer. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong," Deshawn pleaded, his voice cracking. The fear was turning to desperation. He knew how these situations could escalate, how quickly a misunderstanding could spiral into a tragedy. He'd seen the videos, heard the stories. He thought of his mother's face, the worry that would cloud her eyes. That was when Mallory's patience, if he ever had any, snapped. "Enough of this," he snarled. In a swift, brutal motion, he lunged forward and grabbed Deshawn's arm, his fingers digging into the boy's bicep like a vice. "Hey!" Deshawn cried out, a jolt of pain and shock shooting through him. He instinctively tried to pull away. The resistance was all the justification Mallory needed. He tightened his grip, yanking Deshawn forward and off balance. The paper bag tore the pint of ice cream, tumbling out and hitting the pavement with a sad, wet thud. The lid popped off, and mint chip ice cream, already melting in the oppressive heat, splattered across the grimy concrete. "Resisting arrest, huh?" Mallory growled, his face inches from Deshawn's. "You're in a world of trouble now, kid." He was spinning Deshawn around, forcing his arms behind his back, with practiced, painful efficiency. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the afternoon air. Deshawn's mind went blank with terror. This couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare, a terrible waking nightmare. He could feel the rough brick of the Trader Joe's wall scraping against his cheek as Mallory shoved him against it. "You have the right to remain silent." Mallory began rattling off the Miranda rights with a bored, detached tone that made the whole situation feel even more surreal. Tears of frustration and fear welled in Deshawn's eyes. He squeezed them shut, his world reduced to the rough texture of the brick, the searing pain in his wrists, and the booming voice of the officer who had judged and condemned him without a shred of evidence. He thought of his mum, her text message, her smiling emoji. She was on her way. But she would be too late. From down the street, a sleek black Audi A8 turned the corner. It moved with an understated elegance, a quiet predator in a sea of ordinary sedans and SUVs. The driver, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense set to her jaw, scanned the street. Her brow furrowed as she saw the police car parked haphazardly its lights now flashing, casting a garish, frantic rhythm on the storefronts. And then she saw it. A tall, lanky teenager pressed against the wall, a hulking police officer cuffing him. Her blood ran cold. The world seemed to slow down, every detail sharpening into painful focus. She saw the torn paper bag, the green and brown puddle of ice cream on the pavement, the anguished expression on the boy's face as he turned his head. It was Deshawn, her Deshawn. A primal roar of maternal fury erupted in her chest, so powerful it almost stole her breath. But Zara Hayes was not a woman who screamed. She was a woman who acted. Her entire life, her entire career had been a training ground for moments like this. She had battled giants in courtrooms, dismantled arguments with surgical precision, and faced down corporate bullies with ice in her veins. She was a senior partner at Covington and Burling, one of the most powerful law firms in the country, and she was about to become Officer Mallory's worst nightmare. She pulled the Audi to a screeching illegal halt in the middle of the street, throwing the car into park with a force that shuddered through its frame. She didn't bother to turn off the engine. She moved with a liquid grace, a panther uncoiling. As she stepped out of the car, the hot DC air hit her, but she didn't feel it. All she felt was a cold, laser-focused rage. Officer Mallory, still fumbling with the cuffs on Deshawn's wrists, heard the car stop. He turned his face a mask of annoyance. "Hey, you can't park there," he yelled. His voice filled with the self-importance of a man used to unquestioning obedience. Zara didn't break her stride. She was a vision of controlled power, dressed in a tailored navy blue pantsuit that screamed authority. Her heels clicked on the pavement like the ticking of a time bomb. Her eyes were locked on Mallory, and in them he could see a storm gathering, a tempest of intellect and indignation that he was utterly unprepared for. "That's my son," she said, her voice dangerously calm. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the street noise like a shard of glass. Mallory scoffed, turning back to Deshawn. "Yeah, and I'm the Easter Bunny. Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle and step back. This is an active police situation." "No," Zara said, her voice dropping even lower, gaining an edge of steel. "What this is a violation of my son's civil rights under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. And what you are, officer, is a man who is about to have a very, very bad day." She was closer now, just a few feet away. Mallory finally turned his full attention to her, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features for the first time. This woman didn't look like the hysterical mothers he was used to dealing with. She looked like she could chew him up and spit him out without smudging her lipstick. "Ma'am, I'm warning you," he began, but Zara cut him off. "And I am informing you," she said, her voice precise and cutting. "You are currently illegally detaining a minor without probable cause. You have engaged in what appears to be a Terry frisk without reasonable, articulable suspicion. And you have now escalated to a full-blown arrest without a warrant or a qualifying exigency. Every move you make from this point forward is a potential lawsuit that will cost this city millions, and you personally your career." She reached into her designer handbag, her movements fluid and unhurried. For a moment, Mallory tensed his hand, instinctively going to his weapon. What was she pulling out? A phone to record him. A weapon of her own. What she produced was far more devastating. It was a small leather wallet. She flipped it open with a practiced flick of her wrist. It wasn't a driver's license, she showed him. It wasn't a credit card. It was a gold and blue shield gleaming in the harsh afternoon sun. "My name is Zara Hayes," she announced, her voice ringing with an authority that dwarfed his own. "And I am an assistant United States attorney for the District of Columbia. Now take your hands off my son." The silence that fell over the sidewalk was heavier than the humid August air. It was a weighted, shocked silence, broken only by the distant wail of an ambulance and the hum of Zara's idling Audi. Officer Mallory froze his brain, seemingly unable to process the gleaming shield held before him. His gaze flickered from the badge to Zara's face, then back again. The color drained from his ruddy cheeks, leaving behind a pasty mottled gray. The bravado and swagger evaporated, replaced by a wide-eyed panic. An assistant U.S. attorney, a federal prosecutor. He hadn't just picked on some random kid. He had, in a spectacular failure of judgment, arrested the son of one of the most powerful legal figures in the city. Deshawn still pressed against the wall, twisted his head to look at his mother. He had always seen her as powerful, of course. He'd seen her command a room during parent-teacher conferences and speak with an eloquence that left others speechless. But this was different. This was a raw, undiluted power he had never witnessed. She wasn't just Mom. She was a warrior, and her battlefield was the law. Zara held Mallory's terrified gaze, her expression unyielding. She didn't retract the badge. She let him stare at it, let the full weight of his colossal error crush him. "You have 5 seconds to produce the key to those handcuffs." "Officer," she said, her tone as sharp and cold as a scalpel. 5, 4. Mallory fumbled at his belt, his thick fingers suddenly clumsy and useless. He was sweating profusely now, the moisture beading on his forehead and upper lip. "Ma'am, RUSA Hayes, there's been a misunderstanding." 3. Zara continued, ignoring his stammering. "There is no misunderstanding. I have been observing this interaction for the last 90 seconds. I saw you escalate a non-confrontation. I saw you commit battery against a minor. And I see him standing here in illegal restraints. The only misunderstanding is your belief that your badge gives you the right to be a bully and a thug." I had a report," he stammered, finally retrieving the small silver key. A report of a teenager fitting his description is not probable cause. Zara shot back, her legal mind dissecting his defense before he could even fully form it. It's a boilerplate excuse for racial profiling, and you and I both know it. 2. With a final desperate click, Mallory unlocked the cuffs. The metal sprang away from Deshawn's wrists, leaving angry red marks on his skin. Deshawn stumbled forward, rubbing his circulation back into his hands, his eyes never leaving his mother. He felt a wave of relief so profound it made him dizzy. "Come here, baby," Zara said, her voice softening for the first time as she opened her arms. Deshawn collapsed into her embrace, burying his face in the shoulder of her expensive suit jacket, and for the first time since the ordeal began, he let the tears fall. He wasn't just crying from fear, but from the overwhelming release of it. Zara held him tight, her hand protectively on the back of his head. Her eyes, however, still locked on Officer Mallory. The mama bear had her cub, but the threat was not yet neutralized. Over Deshawn's shoulder, she saw the small crowd that had gathered. Several phones were now raised, their small red recording lights blinking. Good. Witnesses. Documentation. Mallory saw them too, and a fresh wave of horror washed over his face. This wasn't just a career-ending mistake anymore. This was a public humiliation. Now Zara said, her voice returning to its icy professional tone. "Your name is Mallory. What is your badge number?" It's 712, he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the pavement. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at anyone. "Officer Mallory, badge number 712. Zara repeated loud enough for the phone cameras to pick it up clearly. "I want your supervising officer on site. Now." That's not necessary." Ma'am Mallory pleaded, his voice now whiny, pathetic. "It was a mistake. I apologize to you and to your son. I misread the situation." A mistake. Zara's laugh was a short, sharp, mirthless sound. "A mistake is when you take the wrong exit on the freeway. Officer, a mistake is when you buy 2% milk instead of skim. Assaulting a child, illegally arresting him, and trampling on his constitutional rights is not a mistake. It is a willful abuse of power, and it will have consequences. Get your supervisor." Defeated Mallory finally reached for the radio on his shoulder. His hand was shaking. As he mumbled into the receiver requesting a supervisor for a civilian complaint, Zara went into case-building mode. She gently guided Deshawn to the side. "Are you hurt, baby? Did he do anything else to you?" "My wrists," Deshawn whispered, showing her the raw red marks. He wouldn't listen to me, Mum. I told him I had the receipt." "I know, sweetie. I know you did everything right." Her eyes scanned the scene. "The receipt. Do you still have it?" Deshawn fumbled in his pocket and produced the crumpled piece of paper. Zara took it from him as if it were a priceless piece of evidence, smoothing it out carefully before slipping it into her own pocket. Then she took out her phone. She didn't look at her messages or her emails. She opened the camera. Click. A photo of Deshawn's bruised wrists. Click. A photo of the splattered ice cream on the sidewalk. Click. A close-up of Officer Mallory, his face pale and sweaty now, trying to avoid the gaze of the growing number of onlookers. Click. A wider shot capturing the police car, her own illegally parked Audi, and the storefront establishing the scene. She moved with the efficiency of a crime scene investigator, her actions deliberate and purposeful. She then turned to a young woman standing nearby, who was still recording with her phone. "Excuse me," Zara said, her voice polite but firm. "I am Zara Hayes, this young man's mother. Would you be willing to provide me with a copy of that video you're taking? And would you be willing to serve as a witness?" The young woman, a Georgetown student by the looks of her sweatshirt, nodded eagerly. "Absolutely." What he did was disgusting. "My name is Chloe. Here, I can airdrop it to you right now." "Thank you, Chloe," Zara said, accepting the video file. "I'll also need your full name and contact information if you're comfortable with that." She was already opening a new note on her phone, ready to take a statement. Mallory watched this all unfold, a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. This wasn't just being reprimanded. This was an avalanche, and he was standing right at the bottom of the mountain. He had built a 10-year career on bullying and intimidation, on cutting corners and assuming the worst of people who looked like Deshawn. He had dozens of complaints in his file, all of them dismissed, all of them, from people who didn't have the power, the resources, or the knowledge to fight back. But this time, he had picked the wrong one. He had profiled the son of a woman who prosecuted federal crimes for a living. A second patrol car pulled up, this one, driving cautiously. A sergeant stepped out, a man with salt and pepper hair and a weary expression. This was Sergeant O'Malley, a veteran of the force who had seen it all. He took one look at the scene, the illegally parked luxury car, the crowd, his own officer looking like he was about to be sick, and the impeccably dressed woman comforting a crying teenager, and knew this was not going to be a simple, he said, she said. What's going on here? Mallory. O'Malley asked, his voice tired. Before Mallory could formulate a response, Zara stepped forward, her hand outstretched. Sergeant, my name is Zara Hayes. I'm an assistant U.S. attorney. She didn't present her badge this time. She didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight of her office. Your officer has just committed a series of civil rights violations against my son. I have video evidence, a receipt for the goods your officer accused my son of stealing photographic documentation of his injuries, and at least one witness who is willing to give a statement. I trust you will be taking Officer Mallory's badge and weapon for the remainder of his shift, while you open an immediate and transparent internal affairs investigation. Sergeant O'Malley's weary eyes widened slightly. He looked from Zara to his own officer, and the story wrote itself on Mallory's terrified face. O'Malley let out a long, slow sigh. He had been 5 years from retirement. He did not need this. Ma'am, he began, his tone respectful. Let's all just take a breath. I'm sure we can sort this out. Zara's eyes narrowed. With all due respect, Sergeant, the time for sorting things out on this sidewalk is over. The next time we discuss this matter, it will be in a formal setting. My son is a 17-year-old child who was terrorized because he bought a pint of ice cream while being black. Your officer is a danger to the community he supposedly serves. You can handle this properly, or I can escalate this to the Chief of Police, the D.C. Attorney General, and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, where I assure you I have friends. The choice is yours. The threat, delivered so calmly, was absolute. Sergeant O'Malley looked at the puddle of melting ice cream on the ground, then at the red marks on the boy's wrists, and then at the cold fury in the mother's eyes. He knew a losing battle when he saw one. His loyalty to the blue line was strong, but his instinct for self-preservation and the preservation of his precinct from a firestorm of scandal was stronger. He turned to his disgraced officer. Mallory, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Give me your firearm. You're on desk duty until this is cleared. For Officer Mallory, it was the sound of his world ending. The ride home was quiet. The luxurious interior of the Audi, usually a sanctuary of calm for Zara. And Deshawn, filled with the scent of leather and quiet classical music, was now thick with a heavy, unprocessed tension. Zara drove her knuckles white on the steering wheel, her jaw set. Deshawn sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the familiar streets of their northwest D.C. neighborhood, but not really seeing them. He had stopped crying, but the occasional shudder still ran through his body. Finally, as they pulled into the driveway of their stately brick colonial, Zara broke the silence. She turned off the engine and turned to him, her face a mixture of fierce love and profound sorrow. Are you okay? She asked the question so much bigger than the 3 simple words. Deshawn just shook his head, unable to speak. He wasn't okay. He felt violated, humiliated. The memory of Mallory's snarling face, the scrape of the brick on his cheek, the cold click of the handcuffs. It was all replaying in a horrifying loop in his mind. I did what you told me, Mom. He finally whispered, his voice hoarse. I was polite. I kept my hands where he could see them. I didn't argue. It didn't matter. A single tear traced a path down Zara's cheek, a crack in her armor of professional composure. She quickly wiped it away. "I know you did, sweetie. You did everything perfectly. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? None of this is on you." Then why did it happen? It was the question she had spent her entire career trying to answer, the question that haunted her nights and fueled her days. How could she explain the ugly, tangled roots of systemic prejudice to her brilliant, gentle son? "Because the world isn't always fair." "Deshawn," she said softly, her voice filled with a weary pain. "Because some people see a threat where there is only a boy. Because they wrap their own fear and hatred in a badge and call it law. What that man did to you today was not law. It was a crime. And I promise you I will make him answer for it." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "We're going to fight this, not just for you, but for every other kid who doesn't have a mother who can flash a badge to save them." Deshawn looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, and for the first time since he'd seen the officer's shadow fall over him, he felt a flicker of something other than fear. It was a spark of his mother's strength, a nascent resolve. He nodded. "Okay, Mum. Okay." By morning, the video was no longer just viral. It was a national headline. Chloe's blog post had been linked by the Washington Post, then picked up by CNN, MSNBC, and every major news network. The title, "AUSA Mom Stops Cop from Arresting Son for Buying Ice Cream," was everywhere. The story had all the elements of a modern media spectacle: racial injustice, abuse of power, and the dramatic confrontation between a mother protecting her child and an officer of the law. The Hayes' stately colonial home was suddenly under siege. News vans with satellite dishes sprouting from their roofs lined the curb. Reporters camped out on the sidewalk shouting questions whenever the curtains moved. For Deshawn, it was a waking nightmare. His face twisted in fear, and humiliation was on a constant loop on every channel. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, classmates, and even strangers, some offering support, others veiled in morbid curiosity. He retreated to his room, pulling the blinds shut. The digital world he once loved, now a source of torment. Zara, however, was prepared for this. She had faced media scrums before. She issued a brief, formal statement through the U.S. Attorney's Office, stating that the matter was under investigation and that her priority was her son's well-being. She requested privacy and made it clear she would not be commenting further to the press. This was a legal battle, and she would not fight it on television. Her battlefield would be one of sworn testimony and hard evidence. Her phone buzzed. It was an encrypted email from her old colleague, Mark. The subject line read, "The file you requested. Handle with care." Attached was a password-protected zip file containing every document from the Franklin Avenue 7 case. Zara poured herself a cup of black coffee, sat down at her desk, and entered the labyrinth. For hours, she read. She scanned Mallory's official report, a masterclass in creative writing that painted the 7 teenagers as an aggressive, menacing gang. She read the depositions of the other officers on the scene, their statements eerily similar. A chorus of confirmation for Mallory's narrative. Then she got to the victim's testimony, a 16-year-old boy named Leo, whose arm Mallory had broken. Leo's story was starkly different. He claimed Mallory had targeted them without provocation, calling them slurs, demanding they empty their pockets. When Leo had asked why, Mallory had slammed him against a wall. The broken arm, according to Leo, happened when Mallory twisted it behind his back with such force that the bone snapped. The charge against Leo: assaulting a police officer. It had been dropped when the civil suit was filed. Zara's blood ran cold. The parallels were sickening. The manufactured agitation, the immediate escalation to physical force. But it was a small, almost insignificant detail in Mallory's own deposition that made her sit bolt upright. Rizzo Mallory's union rep had been questioning him, and when the suspect became verbally aggressive, "What was your response?" Mallory's answer transcribed in cold black and white text. "I initiated a compliance hold, a two-handed wrist lock to control the subject's right arm, forcing him to turn and face the wall." Zara zoomed in on the video Chloe had sent her. She played it frame by frame. Just before Mallory spun Deshawn around, you could see his hands. He wasn't performing a standard cuffing technique. He was using a specific two-handed grip on Deshawn's right wrist, a move designed to inflict maximum pain and force a subject to turn. It was the exact same highly unorthodox and departmentally unsanctioned hold he had described under oath 2 years ago. It was his signature, a brutal flourish that he was arrogant enough to describe in a legal document. This wasn't just a pattern of behavior anymore. This was a methodology, a repeatable, identifiable, and now provable technique of abuse. Meanwhile, Frank Rizzo and Officer Mallory were planning their counter-offensive. They couldn't deny the video, but they could reframe it. They decided on a classic smear campaign, leaking information to a friendly conservative news outlet. The story that ran that evening was titled, "Activist Prosecutor Bullies Cop What the Media Isn't Telling You." It painted Deshawn as a known troublemaker, citing a single instance of a school detention for talking in class in the 9th grade. It claimed without evidence that he had been belligerent and cursed at Officer Mallory, forcing the officer to restrain him. It portrayed Zara as an elitist, power-hungry official using her badge to intimidate a decorated officer who was just trying to do his job in a high-crime area. The article ended with a quote from an anonymous police source. "This is what happens when we try to police these neighborhoods. Our hands are tied. The criminals get a pass, and the cops get crucified." The narrative was poison designed to muddy the waters and appeal to a public already conditioned to distrust the mainstream media. When Zara saw the article, she didn't get angry. A cold, calculating calm washed over her. They're desperate, she thought. And they're sloppy. They had just handed her another weapon. Defamation. Her phone rang again. It was a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. A message popped up a moment later. The voice was nervous, hesitant. Ms. Hayes. My name is Leo Gomez. I was one of the kids from Franklin Avenue. I saw you on the news. I saw what that cop did to your son. He did it to me, too. They made me say I was lying. My parents were scared. But I'm not a kid anymore. And I'm not scared. Not after seeing your son's face. That cop, he didn't just break my arm. He planted a baggie of weed in my pocket after he did it. His partner saw the whole thing. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what really happened. Zara saved the message. She closed her eyes, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. This was the hard karma she had been looking for. It wasn't just about the assault on her son anymore. It was about uncovering a felony, a conspiracy. The signature wrist lock proved the pattern of assault. But Leo's testimony, if true, could prove a pattern of planting evidence, of framing innocent kids. And that would send Officer Mallory to prison. The storm had gathered. Now it was time to unleash the lightning. The deposition for the civil rights lawsuit Zara had filed against the city, and Officer Michael Mallory was convened in a top-floor conference room at Covington and Burling. The room was a theater of power, all glass and polished mahogany, with a panoramic view of the Washington Monument piercing the sky. It was a calculated choice by Zara, a home field advantage designed to intimidate. The air conditioning hummed a low, thrumming counterpoint to the palpable tension. On one side of the vast table sat Officer Mallory, looking diminished and sullen in a suit that was too tight across the shoulders. Next to him, his union representative Frank Rizzo projected a forced nonchalance, chewing his gum with an obnoxious rhythmic snap that echoed in the quiet room. They had come prepared for a fight, armed with their smear campaign and the unshakable belief in the strength of the blue line. They saw Zara as a vindictive official, an angry mother who had overplayed her hand. They were confident they could weather this storm. They had fundamentally misunderstood the woman they were facing. On the other side, Zara Hayes sat with an almost preternatural calm. She was not here as an AUSA today. She was the plaintiff, a mother. Flanking her was Benjamin Carter, a lion of the DC bar, his silver hair and placid demeanor belying a mind like a steel trap. He had been Zara's mentor, and seeing him there, calm and resolute, gave her a profound sense of stability. Deshawn was not present. Zara had been adamant about shielding him from this, the final brutal stage of the battle. This was her fight to finish. Officer Mallory Ben Carter began his voice, a gentle baritone that filled the room without effort. Let's begin with the afternoon of August 12th. You stated in your official report, and it has been suggested in certain media outlets, that my client's son, Deshawn Hayes, was acting in a belligerent and aggressive manner. Could you please describe this behavior for the record? Mallory shifted in his seat, the leather creaking in protest. He shot a venomous glance at Zara, who met his gaze without flinching, her expression a mask of cool neutrality. He was agitated, Mallory said, his voice a low growl. Mouthy. Refused to comply with simple requests. He had a real attitude problem from the jump. An attitude problem? Carter repeated softly, letting the phrase hang in the air like a foul odor. And yet on the video, which has been viewed, I believe, some 7 million times, we see a young man who addresses you as Sir. We see him attempting to provide you with a receipt for his purchase. We see him only cry out in pain at the moment you initiate physical contact. Where precisely is the belligerence you describe? Officer. The camera didn't show his eyes. Mallory retorted, grasping at straws. The look he was giving me, it was defiant. It's a look I've seen 1,000 times. It's the look before things go bad. Ah, a look. Carter mused, making a small note on his legal pad. A preemptive assessment of potential belligerence based on a look. I see. Zara leaned forward and whispered into Carter's ear. He listened intently, then nodded. Let's move on, shall we? Let's talk about your physical technique. Officer Carter, said, his tone shifting, becoming more focused. Specifically, the compliance hold you utilized on my client's son. He slid a set of glossy, high-resolution prints across the mahogany table. They were frame-by-frame captures from Chloe's video. This two-handed wrist lock. It's a rather unique maneuver. It is not, as I understand it, a standard department-approved technique for the MPD, is it? Mallory stared at the photos. The images were damningly clear, showing his hands contorting Deshawn's arm at an unnatural angle. He glanced at Rizzo, who gave an infinitesimal shake of his head. I used the minimum force necessary to control a resisting suspect. Mallory recited the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. I'm sure, Carter said, his voice laced with faint irony. Is it by any chance the same technique you described under oath during your deposition in the civil matter of Gomez et al. V., the District of Columbia? The case colloquially known as the Franklin Avenue. 7 Carter slid a bound volume, the transcript of Mallory's old deposition, across the table. It landed with a soft thud that sounded like a gavel. The color drained from Mallory's face. He stared at the transcript as if it were a venomous snake. The trap was sprung, and he saw it closing around him. If he admitted it was the same hold, he would be confessing to a pattern of using an unsanctioned and likely torturous technique. If he denied it, he would be committing felony perjury, because the visual evidence in the photos and the video was irrefutable. His own sworn words, his own arrogant description of his signature move, had become the noose around his neck. I don't recall the specifics of every hold I've ever used, he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his lie. That case was years ago. You don't recall breaking a 16-year-old's arm? Zara's voice sliced through the room, cold and sharp as a shard of ice. It was the first time she had spoken directly, and her words carried the weight of both a prosecutor and a mother. The mask was gone. In her eyes was a glimpse of the mama bear defending her cub. Objection. Rizzo barked, jolting upright. The plaintiff is not questioning the witness. This is harassment. It's a deposition. Frank, not a courtroom. She is the plaintiff, and her son was the victim of the same violence. Her question is noted. Carter replied smoothly, his calm a stark contrast to Rizzo's blustering. He raised a hand. Let's take a 5-minute break. I suggest you review your options with your client. The moment the door closed behind them, leaving Mallory and Rizzo in the hallway, Zara made a call. He's here. Send him in now. When the deposition resumed, Mallory and Rizzo returned to the table. Their faces grim. They had clearly decided to brazen it out. But as they sat, the conference room door opened again. A young man walked in. He was 19, with a wiry frame and the haunted, nervous eyes of someone who had seen too much. But there was a new steel in his spine. It was Leo Gomez. "Who the hell is this?" Rizzo demanded, his chair scraping back as he stood. You can't just bring strange witnesses into a deposition. This is an ambush. He's not a witness in this case, Frank. Please sit down, Carter said calmly, his authority silencing the union rep. He is, however, a victim in a separate but deeply related criminal matter. He has provided us with a sworn affidavit, and he has agreed to share his story. We thought Officer Mallory would be interested. He slid copies of Leo's freshly signed affidavit across the table. Mrs. Gomez, could you please tell us what happened on the evening of March 2nd? 2 years ago. Leo's voice trembled as he began. But as he spoke, recalling the injustice, a raw courage took over. He recounted the unprovoked stop, the slurs, the casual brutality of the shove against the wall. He described the searing pain as his arm was twisted behind his back, the sickening snap of the bone. And then he delivered the payload. The real karma. After he broke my arm, after I was on the ground, crying, he stood over me. His partner, Officer Kaczynski, was telling him to back off, that it was too much. He ignored him. He reached into his own duty jacket, then he shoved his hand into my pocket. When he pulled it out, he was holding a little baggie of weed. It wasn't mine. I swear to God it wasn't mine. He looked right at me and smiled. He planted it on me. The room was utterly deathly silent. The only sound was the frantic, rasping quality of Mallory's breathing. His face had gone beyond pale to a ghastly mottled grey. The edifice of his arrogance, built over a decade of buried complaints and union protection, had been leveled by the testimony of one brave kid. "That's a lie." Mallory sputtered, his voice a desperate squeak. "A ridiculous, slanderous lie." "Is it?" Zara's voice was like ice. "Because your partner that day, Officer Kaczynski, seems to remember it differently." She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the door. It swung open again. This time, a uniformed police officer stood in the doorway. He looked older than his years, his face a road map of guilt. It was Mallory's former partner, and he wasn't alone. Flanking him were two stone-faced individuals, a man and a woman whose impeccably tailored dark suits and grim expressions screamed federal law enforcement. They were from the Department of Justice's Public Integrity section. Kaczynski wouldn't look at his old partner. His eyes were fixed on Zara, a silent apology passing between them. "Mike," he said, his voice heavy with a guilt he had clearly carried for 2 years. "I'm sorry. I told them everything. I couldn't live with it anymore." The foundation of Michael Mallory's world did not crack. It vaporized. The blue line he had used as a shield and a sword for his entire career had just turned on him, exposing him completely. Frank Rizzo stared, his mouth hanging open, the wad of gum falling unceremoniously onto the polished table. He saw the DOJ agents. He saw the broken look on Kaczynski's face. He knew, with the chilling certainty of a man who had spent his life navigating the system, that the game was over. He sank back into his chair, a captain abandoning his sinking ship. Michael Mallory, the female DOJ agent, said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion, as she stepped forward, producing a set of handcuffs from her belt. "You are under arrest for perjury, falsifying a police report, and conspiracy to violate civil rights." The sharp, metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was deafening in the silent room. This time, they were for him. The karmic echo was perfect, brutal, and absolute. As the agents led him away, a broken and defeated man, his eyes met Zara's one last time. He searched her face for triumph, for gloating, for some sign of personal victory. He found none. All he saw was a soul-hard and final justice. 3 months later, the world had moved on. The news cycle had churned through a dozen other scandals. But in the Hayes home, a quiet transformation had taken place. Michael Mallory had pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for testifying against a wider ring of corruption within his precinct that Rizzo had helped cover up for years. He was facing a substantial prison sentence. The city had settled Zara's civil suit for a record amount, all of which she placed in a trust dedicated to funding civil rights litigation for underprivileged youth. One evening, Zara came home from work to find Deshawn hunched over his laptop, not playing a game, but working. The screen was filled with lines of code and a sleek, minimalist design. "What's that?" she asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's an app," he said, his face lighting up with a passion she hadn't seen since before that awful day. "I'm calling it The Shield. It's a Know Your Rights app. It has state-by-state laws on police encounters, a one-touch button that starts video recording and uploads it to a secure cloud, and it automatically alerts 3 emergency contacts with your GPS location." Zara's heart swelled with a pride so intense it brought tears to her eyes. He had taken his trauma, his humiliation, and forged it into a tool to protect others. He had found his own way to fight back. "That's brilliant, Deshawn," she whispered. Later that night, they sat together in the living room. Deshawn went to the kitchen and returned with 2 spoons and a small, familiar-looking container. It was a pint of sublime mint chip ice cream. He wordlessly handed her a spoon. For a moment, Zara just looked at it, the symbol of their shared nightmare. But as she looked at her son, at the resilient, brilliant, and compassionate young man he was becoming, she saw that it was just a container. Its power was gone. She took the spoon, dipped it in, and took a bite. It was cool, sweet, and perfect. The shattered afternoon had given way to a healing evening. The battle was over. Her son was safe. And he was stronger than ever. Justice is not always a lightning strike from the heavens. Sometimes it's a quiet, methodical dismantling of a corrupt system by those brave enough to challenge it. It's the resilience of a young man who turns his pain into purpose. And sometimes it's the unwavering love of a mother who will move heaven and earth to protect her child. This story is a testament to the fact that while the arc of the moral universe is long, it does indeed bend toward justice, especially when people like Zara and Deshawn Hayes are there to pull on it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And in the comments below, tell us about a time you witnessed someone stand up against injustice. Your story matters.